Hello, today is Friday, September 20th, and welcome to episode 362 of Fault Lines, the National Security Institute's podcast that gets you quickly up to speed 3 times a week on the national security and foreign policy debates shaking up America and the world, for that matter. I'm NSI Deputy Executive Director Martha Miller, and I'm joined today by NSI Fellow Jessica Jones and Lester Munson and Jeffrey Wells. On today's episode, we will focus on the rapidly escalating situation in the Middle East, where Israel's covert strikes on Hezbollah's communications networks, including the unprecedented use of exploding pagers and radios, have left the region on edge. Hezbollah has vowed retribution, and tensions along the Israel-Lebanon border are mounting. We'll dive into what these latest developments mean for the broader geopolitical picture, the risks of escalation, and how this impacts the ongoing conflict in Gaza. Jess, let's start with you. Let's talk about the nature of the attacks. The use of everyday devices, such as pagers and radios in covert operations, is a striking development. How has this operation against Hezbollah shifted the landscape of modern warfare? And what are the implications with supply chain and just strategic military operations in general?
I think one of the things that struck me first about this story is that you hear U.S. intelligence sources saying that this operation might have been planned for over 15 years, which is a decade and a half. And you think about kind of when I look at American national security, whether it's the public or policymakers, they're focused on kind of the short term and the immediate, right? And we can think about that for a number of reasons, whether that's electoral. We've got half of Congress running for election every 2 years. We've got, potentially a new president every 4 years. But that ability to think long term and the success that comes from that, it leaves me worried that Americans aren't as wired for that. And, thankfully, we're talking a lot more about China and Russia and the larger threats that loom there from nation state adversaries. And we are talking about supply chain security, right? That is a growing part of the policymaker toolkit and what we're focused on. But I mean, this story of pagers, you think of any modern electronics that we use, from our phones, the thousands of parts, the dozen countries that these parts go through, and the complexity of trying to secure them. That's a huge feat. And, thankfully, both the last couple of administrations have been focused on it. But whether we continue to be focused on it, I mean, this story should prompt us to continue. But it does leave some worry. I do on the operational side wonder about the timing, whether ceasefire discussions seem to be dropping, whether the Israelis thought the pagers were about to be found out, what prompted the attack. And, we don't see any stories of senior leadership getting killed or injured. So really, what is the impact on the ground?
Jeffrey, can you speak to the psychological effects of this? It surely has a big impact. Could you address that?
Sure. And also, I question whether this is considered modern technology. But, perhaps 15 years ago, it was still on the cutting edge. But as Jessica said, this has been in play for 15 years. Now that's been made kind of public. And this type of attack really creates distrust within those organizations. And not only from they thought they could trust outdated technology. Now they can't even trust any technology. But they also can't trust those who are around them. Because if this has been going on for 15 years, it could be their closest confidants. So I'd say, the kind of the win here is that Israel has been able to disrupt Hezbollah to the point where they don't trust each other. Communications, at least for the short term, have shut down, and isolation definitely is going to be a result. I'm also a little concerned. This, as a history buff, this likens to the 30 Years' War, 1618 to 1648, of kind of these back and forth, and sort of there's high escalation with really kinetic and then low tech things, and this to me just doesn't see that I see an end from a blend of asymmetric tactics and conventional responses. It only prolongs conflicts, and this has been going on for 26 years, if not longer, with Hezbollah, and it could lead to unforeseen escalations and definitely blurs the line between military and civilian targets. And I don't. I'd love to have an answer to, and perhaps Les can answer this for me. Because he always says the answer, but I'd like to know how this ends.
Yeah. Well, Lester, on that note, obviously we have another neighbor in that neighborhood who takes a deep interest in what happens in Lebanon. Could you address some of the comments that have been made coming out of Tehran? What do you think this might mean in terms of retaliation?
Right. So I do think it's smart to see what's going on between Israel and Hezbollah in the larger context of this kind of meta conflict between Israel and Iran. And you just go back and look at some of the things that have happened just this year. The Israelis killed a Hamas leader in Tehran, assassinated him in his guest bedroom, in a plot that probably lasted for months, if not years, the ability for them to do that. They are now blowing up pagers and walkie-talkies and solar panels of Hezbollah in southern Lebanon. They're inside the heads of the Iranians. Parenthetically, the Iranian president died this year in a helicopter crash in Azerbaijan. Helicopters are dangerous. The weather was bad. They were flying over mountains. We don't really know what happened. But boy, it kind of makes you wonder, doesn't it? So I think we'd be smart to see this as a more complex situation, and I think it's not just a two-party conflict here. So when the Israelis undermine the integrity of Iranian support for its proxies, it can metastasize across a number of issues, and it really does. Hezbollah doesn't totally control Lebanon. I mean, and they're not Lebanon. There are other forces in Lebanon. How will they react to what is happening to Hezbollah? The other Lebanese are going to quietly celebrate the Israelis taking out Hezbollah. Can something happen because of that? So this is not necessarily something that Israel itself has to go solve. It's a little bit more, I think, binomial. Is that the right word? A little
I thought
more.
You would say nuance.
Well, it's a little less nuanced, a little more one-on-one with Hamas, I would say. But I think that the long-term effect of this could be very advantageous to Israel. It doesn't necessarily mean they have to roll into southern Lebanon with tanks to clear it out. There may be other things that happen because of the way they're undermining these Iranian proxy forces.
So this complicates the situation for Secretary Blinken. He was in France yesterday, and he did call for restraint. Would anyone care to comment on the challenges the secretary is facing, and in light of the upcoming change in administration, whatever that may be, what are the challenges in Washington?
I just have a question: if he called for restraint or if he used a pager for restraint. But I'll leave it to others to answer that question.
Martha, I'll give probably a less accurate, but hopefully more serious answer, which is, Kamala Harris, as the vice president of the United States, has been out there saying, what we really need is a ceasefire and the hostages to be returned. That's her supposed policy for Gaza. That is now off the table. So what is she going to say for the next month and a half in this campaign about what U.S. policies should be when, the legs, whatever illusions we had that was still possible are now totally gone. So what is the real policy of the Democratic Party presidential candidate and the Biden administration in the Middle East now? Are they going to be more honest about what it is they're trying to do?
Where's the question? Do we think the Trump team will come out with also a policy plan if they were to take over the White House for what they plan?
I'm not holding my breath on that one, Joan.
Well, I think the plan would be, that they would just throw cats and dogs at the problem. But I think that their plan is they would have a plan, but they're not going to tell anybody what the plan is.
Concepts of a plan.
Yes.
Concepts.
Well, on that note, that's a wrap. Thank you to this team and to Devlin Burney in particular, Claude Jennings, and the NSI staff for their help in hosting today's episode. Join us Monday, September 23rd, for another episode of Fault Lines and the National Security Institute's podcast that gets you smart fast on the national security and foreign policy debates shaking up America. Fault Lines is now on YouTube, so check out our channel for a video of today's episode. If you like what you heard, be sure to rate, review, and subscribe. And I hope you have a wonderful weekend.